So, Archie, with all the political backlash around DEI from the new administration, I think a lot of folks in this audience are feeling a little bit uneasy. Folks are calling in their legal teams. Some folks are quietly, ever so quietly, removing DEI from their websites or their public reports. And some are even rolling back their commitments entirely. And so with that, there's a lot of noise out there and plenty of questions. Is DEI dead? What comes of the progress that we've made? And my coffee was too hot this morning. Do I blame DEI? Right? Is that DEI's fault? That's the real question.
It was black coffee, too.
It was.
It was black coffee. Yeah.
We're going to get to the bottom of this. So let's get rid of all the noise and let's make it plain. How do you, Archie, think about the work of advancing opportunity for all, especially for the underrepresented, or in your case, as you would put it, the underestimated?
Thank you so much for having me. So glad to be here. I've got to recognize our leaders, our emerging leaders, Green Biz 2025, emerging leaders. What a fantastic group. Join me in giving them an extra round of applause. And I'll answer your question about how do I think about where we're headed with a little bit of a story taking you back. How many folks have heard of Linda Gooden? Linda Gooden, I'll give you the established leader. Linda Gooden, who sits on the board of Home Depot, African-American woman, by the way, sits on the board of Home Depot, sits on the board of GM. Anybody, I don't see a lot of hands. And I think it's a great story of not just her as the established leader, but her as the emerging leader. You may quickly be able to Google and figure out that she sits on these boards. The story that you got to dig for a little bit more is Linda Gooden as the emerging leader. Back in the 1980s, she was a part of a team running a small division inside of Lockheed. If you looked at the financial statements, it would have been listed as other if it was listed as all. If it was listed at all, probably less than $10 million unit. She saw an opportunity in this government IT division, raised her hand, leaned forward, asked for resources, got a lot of help, mentoring and support. And when she retired about 10 years ago, that was one of now Lockheed Martin's biggest divisions, one of its 4 largest divisions, multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and now she sits on those boards. And so what I want you to take away from that is not just a great black history moment or BIPOC leader moment, but this story of entrepreneurship, this story of innovation, this story of inclusion, as you talked about it. And so as I think about where we're headed into an environment where I don't know for sure, but I'm almost certain there probably wasn't a DEI program for Linda Gooden when she was working it through. So now we're back in this time period where we may or may not have one. And how are we going to navigate without it? First off, to my emerging leaders and to the corporation around, I know we're going to need to change the name. As you pointed out, we won't be talking about it as DEI. It will be masked or changed its name into something else, the belonging group, the belonging committee, whatever it may be. So for my emerging leaders, get ready for we're going to have to look for it a little bit harder, right? It won't be listed as the BIPOC Emerging Leaders Program, right? They will have changed the names. They will have changed the sign on the door for us. We're going to have to have our radar attuned to looking for where these opportunities are. What I'm hopeful about is that it's moving to a conversation around inclusion, which I don't think of as a bad word, and belonging as you describe it. And that these programs now need to include everybody in our manager preparedness, in our leadership development. Because quite frankly, we all do need some leadership development. And I'll talk to you as we go through a little bit around, as I talk through, and one of the things I wanted to share as well leading off is, again, NxGen Coaching Network, we develop leaders all the time. I'm so impressed with what I've seen from this year's emerging leaders that we're going to invest alongside Diageo and actually take these set of leaders and the alumni through our Leadership Capital Workshop to help them develop as leaders. Because the first thing we've got to do is be able to invest in these leaders.
I mean, that's so very generous. I really appreciate you. And I hope other people take a cue from that. There's opportunities that we can provide just on a regular basis. And one of the things that I want to jump into is our emerging leaders, we polled them, not just this cohort, but the entire community of emerging leaders that we've engaged since 2017. We polled our entire community and found that by far, their top 2 career challenges are, number 1, a lack of effective networks and mentorship resources. So, number 1. And number 2, imposter syndrome, i.e., the experience or the feeling that you don't belong in a certain space. And I'm wondering, from your perspective as a leadership coach, as someone who's trained leaders, but also from the audience's perspective, leaders at companies that are doing good, what do you make of that, and how can companies and leaders create solutions to problems, to this particular problem, within their own company?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that you need to do. One, I describe this as a 2-part journey. First, you've got to take the internal journey. And so I'm speaking directly to these emerging leaders, but I want you to be thinking about the message that I'm giving them to take back to the emerging leaders in your organization, because you know they're out there. That internal journey starts with 2, and overall, we're trying to build confidence. There's a confidence that is needed to break through and get past the imposter syndrome. There's some building blocks to that. The internal journey takes you through the 2 places. 1, understanding your capability. What is the superpower? What do you bring unique to the table? You mentioned, what can you do better than 1,000 other people in the room? There is a thing. You have a special gift, and it is incumbent upon you and your organization to help you find it. The second thing that we got to then get to, after we've talked about the capability, is culture. Loaded word, means a lot of different things, but at the individual level, celebrating your culture individually, your ancestral culture, the home you grew up in, the challenges you've been through. In so many cases, we use this as a liability, and it holds us back. We got to work through and be able to look at that as an asset. The fact that you've come through some challenges, the fact that you've seen some hard times, from whatever angle that may be, actually pre-qualifies you for a number of opportunities. And so I've got to take you through, and your organizations have got to help these young leaders, these emerging leaders, focus in on that internal piece. And from an inclusion standpoint, all of our managers need to go through that. I think one of the things that comes in as a piece of what you're describing is manager effectiveness. All of our managers and leaders of all races, of all genders in the organization need to get more confident in their own set of capabilities and their culture, because you can't appreciate someone else's culture if you don't fully appreciate your own. And so I love this idea of inclusion, where we're going to spend time across the entire organization. And then the second half of that is going external, to your second point, on connections. After you've got a solid footing on what your capability and what your capability is, then you can start talking about communicating that story externally. Then you can start about what do I need. You can start effectively saying, here's what I bring to the table. Here's why I belong. Here are some of the things that I'm going to raise my hand and say that I need. And then I think the last piece that I'll put in there as well is we need to take out the arrogance and the elitism that's within innovation. Too many of us walk around thinking, and yes, I work at an Ivy League school and I've got some Ivy League degrees. Innovation is not held solely by the folks with the big titles and the Ivy League degrees. Sustainability is all about innovation, and those ideas are hidden inside of some of our emerging leaders, those on the front lines, those closest to the challenge, those closest to the customer, those who have experienced some of the downside of some of the things that we're trying to work our way through. And so we've got to, when we talk about inclusiveness, we've got to include them in the innovation conversation as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. In our final moments, I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom or words of advice. I know a lot of companies in this room have leadership development programs. You obviously coach leaders. I'm wondering if you have any best practices or words of wisdom for those operating those programs or looking to elevate those leaders into new positions and keep them there as well.
I think the key thing that I would leave you with is, and I talked about those kind of 5 C's, from capability to culture, communication, connection, bringing you back around to confidence, and I'm keyed in on that confidence piece. Your goal as you're developing leaders in your organization is to build their confidence to a level where it actually exceeds their capability. Because that's where the real breakthroughs come back, where those real breakthroughs come from. That's where innovation starts. That's what allows you to take some entrepreneurial risks inside of an organization, is when slightly, just my confidence exceeds my capability slightly, so that I try some things that are out of my comfort zone, so that I'm comfortable asking for help from somebody else, because I know I've got a big goal in mind, but I may not have everything within me personally to get there. I need to go talk to some other folks who've got some other superpowers. And so I think that moving the culture inside of the organization to be more entrepreneurial and be ready to stretch beyond your current capabilities towards that confident future that you're excited about.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Archie. Really appreciate you.